Okay, so let's talk more about what's going on with ESL here in China, because as I said in a previous video, things are going through massive changes here in China post-COVID-19 as the cards continue to fall, and we're all seeing where they lay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rojo Reads the News. I'm your host, Paul. Today I have an article that was originally sourced by thepienews.com and has been aggregated by English teacher, gentleman Colin Quinn. Or Callan Quinn, I think it is. Callan Quinn. Wall Street English staff reveal pay cuts and layoffs. So if you don't know, Wall Street English is one of the largest English training centers in the world, really. They have a huge footprint here in China. They've got a great reputation as far as training centers, high-end training centers. They kind of, I guess, specialized in business English, but also just general English, and they're just one of the larger groups here. All the teachers there wear shirt and tie kind of thing. Now, I bring this up because I recently have made acquaintance with a former Wall Street English teacher who is now working here in Zhongshan, and I got kind of the inside scoop about what is going to be reported here in this article. And it's fascinating, and I think all the teachers out there should be aware of what's going on in the industry as a whole. So what's happening here in China could very well happen throughout the world. There are trends that are happening here that we all need to be aware of if you're in the ESL industry. China's foreign high-end English language training brands have been under scrutiny even before the coronavirus outbreak. Web English collapsed last year. Yes, that was a big deal, Web English collapsing last year. I remember that. I had a lot of friends who were working for Web. And this is true, before I came to China, I actually interviewed for Web, and they did not hire me. It's probably a good thing. Metin merged with an education-oriented acquisition company at the end of March, and even EF, which is English First, was reportedly looking for a buyer in China, but has since put that plan on hold due to current COVID-19 situation. Wall Street English, sold by Pearson in 2017 to Baring Private Equity Asia and CITIC Capital Holdings Limited, is another sizable operator in China. But it has downsized its teaching capacity, and a number of the company's employees have described a series of decisions by senior management that have left them out of pocket, unemployed, and without the proper papers needed to legally find new jobs. And it's not just Wall Street English that has been guilty of these. Many of the smaller operators have not been doing well. And if you were working for one of these smaller operators, unfortunately, you're on the short end of the stick with this thing. A lot of teachers here were kind of left out to dry in many ways, and this goes into it. But I also want to point out that anytime a company is acquired by a private equity group, you're going to expect massive changes in management policy, because oftentimes, in order to finance these acquisitions, you have to incur lots of debt. You either sell off certain parts of the company or you reduce expenses. So anytime a company is acquired by a private equity group, you can expect things like this to happen. I have a lot of experience with teaching, and I've never known anything like this, said one former employee. The teacher claimed they've hidden behind the virus. They've used the virus as a way of getting out of paying salaries or terminating people and of forcing people to resign. Yes, that's not just happening in China. That's happening in every country in many industries. They're hiding behind this virus or using it as an excuse to make certain changes that may or may not be credible. On January 31st, Wall Street English sent an email to its China-based employees with revised dates for returning to work. The government had decided to extend Chinese New Year in order to buy time to prevent the spread of COVID-19. After the normal return to work, according to the time stipulated by the local government, all employees need to go to work normally, the email stated. Employees were mostly working via computer at home, although those who didn't have access to the necessary equipment continued to work from centers in order to make use of facilities there. A few weeks later, on February 24th, CEO David Kedwards held a town hall meeting with employees over the social media app WeChat. Such meetings were held regularly and attended by staff across China. The idea behind them was to make announcements and give employees a chance to send in questions for senior management. Many were unable to attend due to class scheduling conflicts. They therefore didn't hear until later that Kedwards had announced that the entire staff salaries would be cut for February by 50%, meaning they would only receive half of their wages for work already done. without it being repaid in the future. Kenwords himself said he was taking a pay cut of 60%. We'll also be looking to defer previously earned bonuses until after the crisis, he added, but we're going to need to stop any bonuses going forward whilst the crisis is still on us. It's because you have cash flow issues. Recent acquisition, taking on a lot of debt, not a lot of cash coming in, no new sales. Your company is in trouble. In the days that followed, staff were sent agreements that stated that the pay cut laid out in them had been reached by both parties based on good faith, adding that bonuses would be paid back in Q3 of 2020 on condition that the government declares the end of the outbreak and Party A's business recovers. That's an awful lot of subjective conditions. The outbreak is declared over and Party A's business recovers. Recovers to what? It's very, very vague. And essentially they can do anything they want with a statement like this. There wasn't any negotiation at all. We got the letter for us to agree to the 50% cut, which I didn't sign. In fact, I emailed back and said, no, I don't accept it. But they cut the money anyways, one employee said. Yeah, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You know, you have almost zero recourse in these situations, especially during these special times. We went to the Labor Department to complain and they called somebody in HR. HR said that they had negotiated and we agreed, which is not true. Whether or not employees negotiated is important positioning, they say. Under laws brought in by the Chinese authorities during the coronavirus outbreak, employees had to consent to any pay changes and be given the opportunity to negotiate. Staff said this never happened. Several teachers quit on the spot in protest, while others wrote to the CEO to complain. They say his reply didn't address any of the questions raised. Somebody else sent an email and got the same response. It was just a cut and paste job, the employee adds. Yeah, I mean, this is a giant corporation, Wall Street English. This type of treatment to the employees does not surprise me when you have an organization this large. A few days later, it was announced pay would be delayed as the new salaries were recalculated. Although wages went back to normal for March, good, the problems for teachers were just beginning. Up to 1,500 employees were reportedly suddenly laid off, effective immediately, according to sources who spoke with The Pie. What exacerbated the problem for me is that the majority of us took a loan with the company when we moved to China in order to put down a deposit for an apartment, one teacher, Charlotte, remembers. In China, the initial payment for an apartment is usually the equivalent of 2 months' rent, as a deposit plus the first month of rent. Many teachers will take some kind of advance on salary or a loan in order to get settled here, and that's because they don't come here with any money. And I've said this many times, if you're going to come to China, if you're going to move to any country and try to establish a life, why would you do that with no cash? You have to have money to establish yourself, to put a down payment on an apartment, to buy pots and pans, to take care of yourself. Do that before you make a move. And this happens to a lot, especially young teachers who see this as a way of getting out of a financial difficulty that they're in their home country. This is not a solution to your financial woes. Stop thinking of it like that. If you do that, you will undoubtedly be put into situations where you have zero leverage. People are going to take advantage of you. Make sure you have money before you come to China. Period. Having already taken an involuntary 50% pay cut for work already done, Charlotte then found that the loan repayment was being taken out of her severance pay. So she went to speak to a manager. She started screaming at me, insulting me to a degree that I cannot begin to describe. They stole my entire severance to cover the loan. Wall Street English just did what it wanted to do, she said. They didn't steal your severance. Okay, you were paying back the money you borrowed. Sorry, that's reality. You know, I feel for your situation, I really do, but you put yourself into that situation, so you have to take a personal responsibility for your own finances. At least I had some savings before this, but some teachers had paid a lot of money to come over here, and the company was supposed to pay their airline ticket to go back to their country at the end of the contract and is refusing to do that. Some of Wall Street English's remaining staff are now preparing for next steps and leaving none too favorable reviews on Glassdoor, due to the belief that operations in China may not be continuing into the long term. If you look at any training center throughout the world on Glassdoor, you will never see good reviews, because the only people who put those reviews on there are the people with bad attitudes or had bad experiences, whereas the vast majority of teachers actually have really good experiences with these companies. The company declined to comment on market speculations or its claims of its employees. Naturally, we have adjusted our business. While our offline centers in China have remained closed since January 2020, in line with government requirements, all students do have access to our online learning system, and our teams continue to deliver online classes, which are safer, more accessible, and flexible in these uncertain times, the spokesperson said. That is just a canned response that is written and copy and pasted by some person in public relations. It's unfortunate when I read something like that. I'm tired of seeing that these online courses are safer, more accessible, and flexible, and they're actually better for the teachers and better for the students. No, that's not always the case. It is less expensive for the company, and their margins will be higher. They never mention that in these little responses to the media. We continue to do our utmost and protect our students and employees in the current difficult circumstances. I believe China has a very robust ESL industry, private ESL industry. It's one of the largest markets in the world. I think it's actually the largest market. And compared to other countries in Asia, it is kind of the standard, and a lot of people were bullish on English training for over a decade here. I still think that's going to be the case. But with the growth of this market and the stage that it was in, it wasn't a fully matured market. It had started to establish some national brands, some national recognition in these brands, and also establishing some market share in certain regional markets. But it was still in its infancy in the long term. So a lot of investment was continuing to be made, and a lot of money being spent to capture that market share and that growth. And that left the entire industry vulnerable to something like the COVID-19 crisis. And that's why you're seeing things like this happen. So I don't want to say it's poor money management. I mean, these companies, in my opinion, were probably doing everything correct to capture market share in a growing market and investing in the future. And if that includes borrowing money to do that, that's fine. That's what you're supposed to do in business. No one could have seen this happening. I just don't like seeing companies throw a lot of BS and these canned PR messages out to employees in the world. I would rather them just be completely honest. What do you think? Comment below, let me know.